Hello, listeners. Welcome to yet another season of Courage Talks. I'm starting a season specially for entrepreneurs, and my very first guest is Yashish Dahiya. Yashish probably does not need much of an introduction, especially if you're from the startup world. But for listeners who might not know, Yashish is the founder of PolicyBazaar, and not many people know he has had a quite a glittering career before that. I'll let Yashish do the rest of the introduction. Welcome, Yashish.
Thank you, Ethel. I am the founder of PolicyBazaar. It's been running for the last 16 years now. We're in our 16th year. We went public 2 years ago. And before PolicyBazaar, I used to work at Bain as a strategy consultant in the London office. And prior to that, I worked for 4 years at IW Signode, which is an industrial packaging company in India. I have two children who are both in college now, and most of my family lives in Wimbledon. My wife and my children live in Wimbledon, and my parents live in India.
Wonderful. A lot of us obviously know what you are today, Ashish, but take us down memory lane. Tell us what was growing up all about. How were you as a kid? Shararat kari thi? Yeah, were you more of the quiet types? Any incident which remind you of your childhood? Anything significant from courage perspective? That would be fabulous to know.
I think I was a keen child. I was always active. I would say there are two phases to my growing up. One would be before I was about 8, 9 years old, and that was in places like Jammu and Kashmir and Meerut, which were both cantonments like army stations with my father, both in peacetime and field times, and studying at various schools. And the second phase was going to hostel, which was from about 8, 9 years till about 15, 16 years. I was in a hostel. And the more aware phase is the hostel phase. From whenever I remember, at about the cusp of these two, I started running. And I think running has been part of my life since I was about 8 years old. So that is a normal thing that's gone on. Courage point of view, I don't know. I just grow up like a normal child, and I'm sure we all do a lot of courageous things. But one thing I do remember when I was very, very young, this is like maybe I was 4, 5 years old, and I used to have nightmares at times. And my father told me it's okay because you sometimes have nightmares, and it's very difficult to be brave in your dreams. And it was a very particular nightmare. It used to be, I had seen this movie, Kartavya, in which Dharmender is there, and Dharmender is a forest officer, and there are a lot of animals, etc. in that. So I used to have this thing that, the animals are attacking the village, and we are living in the village, and then I would struggle to move that situation. And that night when the dream came, I just decided that today I will be brave in the dream. And essentially, when the tigers and all came, and when people started running, I actually started moving towards the tigers. And I think that was a very good thing because since then I never had that dream again. So I think it just tells you can be brave in your dreams also.
No, I think that's very interesting. And a lot of us are sort of quiet during our childhood, more introverts. And nightmares obviously are something must be troublesome because of your DNA and nature. You might not have been open to talk about them. And as long as you don't talk about them, they continue to haunt you. And very interesting story that you shared. When it comes to courage, we all have our own heroes, we have our own backgrounds. Who is your hero or idol when it comes to courage?
I don't have too many. Maybe I read too little, maybe I think too little. I don't think about too many other people. So you will always find me struggling to come up with who inspires me or who do I think upon, who do I look up to. There's almost nobody. I'm fairly first principles driven. I know that's not an answer that usually makes sense, but honestly, that's the straight answer. I'm usually not a person who gets inspired just, you know. I think I would spend a lot of time trying to, look at things, and I think people react differently in different situations. I don't look up to any one person as being courageous or something of that sort.
Got it. For a lot of us, our parents are our first heroes. We have been with our parents right from childhood. You said you have an army background. Any instances which you would like to talk about as far as your parents are concerned? ऐसी कोई वारदात आपको याद हो जो
See, when I say this, courage, I think the most courageous thing my parents did was at about 8, 9 years of age, send me to a hostel. There's a very particular reason for that because my dad was an army officer, and sending both kids to hostel was a very expensive decision for him. It was almost 80% of his salary. Me and my sister both went to hostel for about 7, 8 years each. And during that time, it used to be about 80% of his salary used to go towards our hostel fees. So I don't know how he survived
Hmm.
and how he made ends meet during that time. But it was a very courageous decision because he took that decision because he thought it was the right thing for us as kids to have gone to a hostel for whatever reason. Whether his reasons were right or wrong, he had a particular belief. He and my mother, and they both took that decision, which was financially a very hard decision for them. But they never let us feel about the hardness of the financial decision. And it was also, in many ways, a fairly stupid decision because if you think about it, yes, they would have sent us to school, but the same money could have been spent on college. And so by the time we came to college, they were pretty much broke. As I said, every courageous act, you can look at it both ways.
I think a lot of courageous acts are at some point of time considered foolish as well, because the perspective of the person who actually does that act, I'm even referring to Bhagat Singh's act throwing a bomb in the assembly, was definitely a courageous act, but some people might have laughed at him and said kya pagal hai yaar?" So I think the perspective of every decision could be looked at that way, and I think that's what makes courageous acts difficult to understand at times. Like you are finding it difficult to understand your parents' decision. Well, I think it's the courageous acts which drive people to do something different. And here I would want to bring up your running and your Ironman journey, which I'm sure would have been courageous in many sense, because when you started off, you mentioned you had not imagined that you would actually reach where you did, but you had a phenomenal record. So tell us a bit about your running journey and especially your Ironman.
See, I think once again, it's a very atypical thing. I was not good at anything. At about 8 years of age, I figured I was good at long distance running and I enjoyed it. I used to just run circles around my house, run from house to house, run around Meerut. And, till then, nobody knew me for anything. But once I started running, people started saying, oh, that's Yashish, he's a runner. And then suddenly people said, oh, you're not so bad at maths also. You're not so bad at physics also. You're not so bad at this also, which earlier people could not see. So it's amazing. The same teachers who were giving me 15 on 100 started giving me 90 on 100. I was the same person. It's amazing how the world looks at you and
Yeah.
how you look at yourself once you become good at one thing. And then you can keep doing other things on top of that. And it's again very atypical, Hetal, because my first Ironman event was actually I just picked up a cycle and went for a competition in India, in Delhi. And it was a half Ironman. And I did it in 5 hours and 19 minutes. It was the very first event I ever did. And I felt very embarrassed because I had come first in the event and there was nobody else there. So I went, took a shower, came back after my shower. And when I had finished my shower, the second person was just coming in. And I said, look, I'm 45 years old. So this is not right because, before the race started, a lot of people looked quite fit. I essentially bumped into it. Then somebody told me, hey, why don't you do Ironman? The first one I did, I think I did it in about 11 hours, 17 minutes. Again, that is quite good for somebody who's 45 or something.
Yes, definitely.
What am
It's a
I trying to
fantastic.
say?
Yeah.
I don't follow objectives or anything of that sort. I just do what I like doing. And I'm actually quite bad at moving out of my comfort zone. And I think courage is actually moving out of your comfort zone. So triathlon was actually my comfort zone. And if you really think about it, my timings haven't improved too much from my first Ironman. My first Ironman and now Ironman are pretty much the same timings. Like, okay, in half Ironman, I've done about 4:30 something, 5:19, 4:30 something are not very different with
Yeah.
all that training, etc., etc. I haven't really picked up football, haven't really picked up cricket, haven't really picked up hockey, haven't really picked up. I do very few new things. I keep doing the same thing again and again. Like if I go to a restaurant, I'll go to the same restaurant again and again and again. If you even think about Policy Bazaar, it has a very strong purpose. There's a reason why we do it. But beyond that, it doesn't change every day.
Hmm.
It's not like we're doing a new thing every day. For the last 16 years, we've been doing exactly the same thing. I know setting up a business is always a courageous act, but I'm going to be a bit odd here. I think courage is taking risks. And I don't think I took a risk when I started Policy Bazaar because I knew exactly what I was doing.
It might have been perceived as a big risk, but you
It
didn't
might
take
have been perceived externally as a big risk. I'll give you an example.
it. Sure.
My father was in the army and he was also a commando dagger. So he's done a lot of things and all. And some of those are considered very brave by a lot of people. They're considered extremely brave because there have been incidents where he's been ultra brave. I know him, he's my father. The issue is, as I deep analyze, he doesn't have a perception of fear. He doesn't have a perception of danger. Now, that's a different thing from bravery. So, if there's an accident about to happen, he won't realize there's an accident about to happen. If there's 20 people standing with sticks willing to fight with him, he will not realize that can be dangerous to him. And I have seen that actually happen. We have a little farm, and there were some people with sticks and all telling us that, some things. And he was just standing there talking. And I was worried because I could sense the danger. He was totally nonchalant about it. But as I deep prospected, it's not bravery, it was just unawareness of danger. To him, that almost did not exist. And if it happened, it would have been a surprise to him that it happened. I hear stories of him where the enemy was firing and our people were taking shelter under a stone. And I've heard these stories of him arrive there and say, "Why are you guys waiting here? Let's attack them." And, Bole Solehal, Satriyakal, and go and attack. But I'm telling you, genuinely, it was not coming from bravery. It was coming from he did not know the bullet could hit him. And I don't know what that means to you, but he's my dad and I know him better than anybody else in the world. But it was actually coming from that.
So I think it's an approach, or he was feigning ignorance, or he was, his
I'm telling you
mindset
the way
was
I'm
such.
telling you. He didn't have the perception. If the bullet had hit him, it would have been a surprise. How the hell did that hit me? And I think it's the same thing. When Policy Bazaar started, I had 100% view that we were going to succeed. If we had failed, it would have been a huge surprise to me. And so now I don't know whether to call that bravery or whether to call that something else. I think, what am I getting at? To some level, bravery is an outcome of lack of perception of risk. And we all have different threat perceptions. Sometimes we overblow the threat. I remember thinking about it and I said, what is a job? Because a lot of people think of job security. What's a job? Any company can fire you in 3 months. So to me, job is just a guarantee of 3 months of salary. It's no security. I think we all have different minds and we all perceive risk and situations differently. One of us is not braver than the other. It is
Right.
just we all have different perceptions. If Policy Bazaar had not worked, think about it. I was living in the UK, children going to private school in the UK, almost no money in the bank, almost negligible, a house on a mortgage. You started a company with almost no salary. For the first 5 years, we had almost no salary. Most people who do this have a spouse with a second income. I did not have that also. So there was no other income source. You'd have to be stupid to do that. Now, I could not think how we would ever fail. And I think that's what eventually gets called bravery by others. Just like my father did not know, because I've spoken to him. He says, I just didn't see how the bullet could ever hit me or the bullets could ever
Yeah.
hit me. Because he tells me those stories where once they were ambushed and the people were on them. And he said, it's just a one split second decision. Because at one split second, if you don't get up and attack, after
You'll
that,
get
you're going
killed.
to be killed. But if you attack, maybe the other side blinks and runs away, and you chase them and you kill them. So I think courage is that one split second thing, and it depends on how our minds perceive it
That's
at
true.
any given point.
No, I think that's very good narration of two different stories. On your father's side, you indicated instances where he was supposedly brave, and yet he was being more of ignorant about the danger around him. Those were split second decisions. At the same time, if I look at your Policy Bazaar story, hanging around for almost 5 years without salary, and I'm sure things got a little better after that. I know the journey is much longer. I'm sure you face many more problems, and yet you had a very similar attitude towards the venture, towards entrepreneurship, towards startup, where you had not even visualized that you could fail. And I think that aspect, the ability to visualize success and not visualize any element of failure, probably they're almost similar.
Eventually, that's it. That's the key.
And the fact that maybe I'm just probing further into your background, maybe you have not had so many stories, and I'm sure in the Indian industry from insurance perspective, nobody was bold enough to have done what you did as far as Policy Bazaar and insurance is concerned. So you didn't have too many people to come and tell you, yeah, this guy's failed, this guy's failed, this guy's failed on what you're doing. So you started literally on an empty slate and said, if there is anything to be scripted here, it's going to be a success story, because whatever I do, I'm going to be the first one doing that. And I think that makes a lot of difference here, to not be blanketed by previous failures, which could be totally irrelevant considering the fact that You had your own approach.
See, I have an approach, to doing things, which is before you do anything, you first decide why you are doing it. Once you know the why, you don't think whether you will fail or succeed, because spending too much time on that is waste,
And I've
right?
heard, not to have a plan B.
Yeah, you just make sure you do it. That's it. It's really that simple. It's not rocket science. If you keep thinking too much about, oh, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, I'm going to fail, I think you'll waste too much energy and you will not inspire confidence in other people. And it's not a, what should I say? It's not a pretend thing. You have to actually believe it. If you don't believe it, don't do it. In the sense, if you don't
Yeah.
believe, see, at a fundamental level, what did I understand in insurance? There was a lot of mis-selling, there was a lot of misinformation. It needed to be corrected. Everybody in the industry did not really want it corrected because the gravy train was on the mis-selling, on the miscommunication, on the opacity of things, etc., etc. I knew it had to happen. I also knew it would take a very, very long time. And I also knew we would stay the course. Those three things you have to know. And it's the same example, Hetal, if you go to the Ironman. When you start, you know it's a difficult course, of
Right.
course. Everybody knows that. But you don't see it that way. You say, okay, it's going to be painful for 10, 12, 15 hours. And I know I will be there at the end of the 15 hours. And I'll enjoy this 15 hours. Once you have that attitude, there is zero risk to you. Now, on the other hand, if at every moment you keep thinking, oh, when I'm running, my heart rate will go so high, I could have a heart attack, I could die. When I'm swimming, jellyfish will bite me. And,
And
it'll be
most
very
likely they will.
painful.
Yeah.
It will be very painful. Yeah, they have bitten me many times, but there's no point thinking about the pain. I'll give you another example. Recently, I was running a marathon and my foot was actually damaged. It was damaged and it was painful. Now, you have two choices, you do it or you don't do it. And I'm not
Right.
saying it's the Ethel, listen. As I said initially, bravery and stupidity are very close to each other. Setting up PolicyBazaar was a stupid decision if you really go back and think about it, as I explained to you. And similarly was this thing. So I told myself, look, I'm going to do this marathon. I want to do it. What's the worst that will happen? My foot will break. It will fall off. Okay, I'm ready for that. Now, yes, it will pain because I have got a damaged foot right now, but I will ignore the pain. And yes, at the end of the 3 hours, I will still be there. That
Yeah.
much I have confidence. Now, what is the risk? Now, there is zero risk. Now, you're just having fun. Somebody could say that's bravery, somebody could say that's stupidity. But eventually, you have to kill the perception totally that there is, the other risk is, oh, when I'm running, maybe my foot will become worse. Maybe it will become so painful, I'll have to stop. Those thoughts are useless to me.
If you have to stop, you stop. But if you
Yeah,
don't
but
start
there's no
the
point
run,
thinking about it right now. There's no
yeah.
point planning for your failure. Don't plan for your failure, is all I would
I know.
say.
That's true. No, I very much agree with you because a lot of people ask me the same question about my Ironman journey. And I tell them, look, all of us have consciously signed up for this event. We are fully aware about the challenges. We are fully aware about the total time required, the kind of capabilities you need. The only reason you might have a DNF is either an accident or an injury or a bike malfunction. Other than that, it's very rare for someone to just miss out on the deadline because of tiredness, because of lack of willpower. And I think that's what stops a lot of people. There is the negative noise or the negative buzz around everything, right from an Ironman to an entrepreneurship, is so strong. And we humans are inherently built for comfort. We seek comfort, we seek safety, we seek pleasure. Anything which which goes against this, people will say, क्यों कर रहा है तू मत कर.
No, I think one important thing is the why has to be very clear. If the why is not clear, then many times there's not point doing anything. The other thing is, it's all of us think of things differently. I'm perhaps the most risk aware person you will ever meet, Hetal. But for me, I always saw a job as a massive risk.
No, I think your explanation is bang on. 3 months of luxury, that's it.
Yeah, anytime they can fire me and it's 3 months. Why do I want to stick on to that? Unless I can believe that the company is doing something so phenomenal. Now that I could not see. What was I doing when I was in ITW Signode? What was I doing? I was selling packaging equipment. I could not see why somebody else could not make that packaging equipment and perhaps just as well. And yes, I was a good salesperson, but I did not know what was so special about me that the company had to pay me what they paid me. So to me, if things were not making sense, but I knew that if we were able to build Policy Bazaar, then it would be a sustainable thing. And so
Right.
to me, it was a rational thing to do.
No, I think a strong sense of self belief or self confidence, as you might call it, what you felt in the packaging business, where you were convinced about the fact that you're able to do a job which is not so big deal for you. A lot of people might not even get there. Similarly, for you, you had that strong sense of self belief that when you were starting Policy Bazaar, it was something which was within your abilities to be able to accomplish. You didn't allow
Yeah.
that element of doubt to come in. That's something beyond you right now. You didn't have any track record of entrepreneurship. Your family doesn't have track record of entrepreneurship. You did not let those hegemonies bother you or block you from going ahead. And I think the other thing which I wanted to relate is you had your back against your wall. You didn't have enough savings. Your family was didn't have a support ecosystem which you could rely on. Getting PB fintech to succeed was the only way forward.
No, absolutely.
We sometimes give ourselves the luxury, right? I've read about so much of not having a plan B is more important than having a plan B. Because the moment you carve out a plan B in your mind, somewhere at the back of your mind, you have something to rely on, to something fall on. Not having a
You know,
plan B gives you
when we were at IIM Ahmedabad, they were teaching us option theory, and they said an option can never have a negative value.
that.
And I remember very well in the class, me again and again trying to argue with the professor,
Huh.
saying, "Sir, no, you are absolutely wrong, sir. Options have a very negative value." And he said, "How can an option have a negative value? Because you don't have to take it."
Yes. Why would you take
So,
it
and
anyway?
I said, "Sir, but the availability of the option
Huh.
reduces your core highest net present value action to happen. And thus, it's very critical that you not have the option because it's reducing your NPV."
Yeah.
I remember this debate crystal clear, and to me, it just did not make sense till the very end. But yes, we would get the right marks by saying that options do not have negative value. And I'm talking about IIM Ahmedabad. I'm not talking about any other institute in the country. So,
That's the way education and reality are, right? But your biggest risk is obviously Policy Bazaar, but the entire entrepreneurship journey, there are a lot of decisions which, again, I'm going to change my lingua for this podcast completely. Perceived risk.
let me explain in my mind how I think about it.
Sure.
The risk of Policy Bazaar failing is much, much lower than the risk of Yashish failing.
Very
And
right.
I mean that and I believe that. So, and I take a meaningful time frame. I say a 10-year time frame. So, in the next 10 years, the possibility that, in my mind, the way I think of it fairly mathematically, the possibility that Policy Bazaar would fail is lower than the possibility that Yashish Dahiya would not be alive. That's the reality. Now,
Hmm.
somebody else may perceive it differently, but that's how much confidence we have in what we have built.
Any instances of vulnerability? Any instances? I know you've not reached a stage where you are going to break down, but were there instances where you felt lonely, where you felt isolated, you could
Yeah,
not
we
hold
had
on
a
to your
very good
thoughts?
team, amazing team. They are like family to me. Alok, who's my co-founder, very different from me in terms of the way he thinks, extremely different. But we're like family here. And my other co-founders, and now Sarabir. So we don't, thankfully, we've never had a chance to feel lonely in that respect. We've had moments in the past when we felt frustrations because people may not be fair to us. The industry at times may not have been fair to us. And there will be frustrating times and we've had tough times. We've never believed that something like Policy Bazaar didn't have place to be. But we have believed that yes, people might be able to stop it one way or the other. Because when you start the business, you don't think of all the naughty ways in which people can come for your business. That does happen, fortunately or unfortunately. The good thing is, as time progresses, you have to see, is time your friend or time your enemy? If time is your friend, then those instances will keep becoming smaller and smaller because people will find it futile. There were instances when people threatened us or whatever, and I don't think we were ever arrogant about the situation, but we were fairly brave in that situation. As an institution, we did not ever bend, we did not ever compromise. See, if you're going to change, transform an industry as large as insurance, let's get it very clear, okay? In insurance, disclosure and sales go against each other. If I disclose more and more to you about the product's negatives, positive everybody will disclose, about the product's negative, the chances are your buying will be less. So, in this kind of a product, it's very hard to make sure you do better disclosure because that, in a way, means you reduce your
Yeah.
revenue.
So it becomes an ethical issue.
And that is what consistently we have been able to do better than most other channels. And I think that is the bravery, because the
Yeah.
bravery is, yes, I will suffer a bit today, but with full knowledge of the fact that we would probably take a lower revenue today. But what that means is 3 years from now, our customers and our partners will be happier. Disclosure comes in many ways. Disclosure is not just product disclosure, also consumer disclosure. Somebody tells you they have diabetes, you tell them not to disclose. Somebody tells you they smoke, you tell them not to disclose. Somebody
Mm.
has a particular disease, you guide them towards non disclosure. So I
Yeah.
think after 3 to 5 years, that would help both the consumer and the insurance partners. And I think just walking the straight path. But I was with a friend yesterday, Hetal,
Mhm.
and I was telling them about this. But they say, Ashish, the problem with you is you don't know any other path. You just know the straight path.
Yeah.
So, to an extent, what you call decisions of bravery, decisions of this thing,
Yeah.
they are just they just come very naturally to you. You don't
Right.
see the other options. So for me, it's
Right.
not an option to not disclose and make a sale. It's not a
Right.
normal thing. It's a
Right.
reality of the industry.
I think that was a amazing example of courage, I would say, probably because you're targeting the mass audience. I've been more of a B2B guy, not a B2C guy. And B2B, of course, the number of instances are phenomenal where I can tweak around my sales pitch in favor of the customer. I would say
Yeah.
things which he likes because I'm facing him up front. I'm seeing his body language. I know what he likes. I know what he doesn't like. But your punt was on the Indian consumer, the mass consumer, and you were relying on the fact that bulk of the consumers will appreciate the fact that you took the ethical way when it came to the right disclosure. A lot of people in the mass media, and I think that's the biggest challenge in B2C, लोग सोचते हैं पब्लिक को बेवकूफ बनाया जा रहा है from a B2C perspective because you want to take on the wave, the propaganda is all oriented towards making the product succeed,
If you
getting
just look at a
more
very
people.
simple thing, Hital, one simple data point, what are our largest selling products? Our largest selling product is term insurance. Second largest selling product is health insurance. I
Yeah.
think if you go into the industry and see how much term is sold as a part of the industry, we all agree term insurance is a great product. It's the product that consumers should buy. But in the industry, it's only 2 3% of the industry sales. For us in life insurance, of the life insurance industry sales. For us in life insurance, more than 50% is term. That itself tells you, if you go on the savings side as well, the more consumer centric products get sold here. I think whichever way you look at it, when you start to look at data, and now what happens is in early days, people will try to manipulate data and somehow make themselves look as good or whatever. But I think as time progresses, this just piles up and it becomes very difficult to compete with reality. So I think that's what courage is, right? At the end of it, you just keep doing the right thing for long enough, and the right thing becomes so loud that the wrong thing cannot do much
That's the only
against it.
thing.
Yeah, that's the only thing.
Very well said. I think whether it is with regard to your Ironman journey, whether it's regard to your corporate life, and with regard to PolicyBazaar, I think having limited your options to the right options or not allowing failure to be an option is probably the best example of courage which you could have put forward. So while you were pretty hesitant in the initial phase of the conversation, downplaying courage as being a facet of your life, I think it's been an integral part of your career and journey, I would say.
I was trying to get the definition right because courage is usually not about foolhardiness or anything. It is sometimes just about closing alternative options and closing your mind to alternative negative situations.
Yeah, I can still go back to what Sanjeev Bikhchandani said. Absence of fear is courage. The very
Yeah.
fact that you're not letting fear be a facet or element of your life in any instance, that automatically brings in courage because half the time people are not even trying to sign up for an Ironman out of the fear. Forget about getting there and getting stuck. They don't even consider it. I know of people who laugh and say, अरे मेरे से हो ही नहीं सकता अरे बॉस साइकिल बाहर निकाल के तो देखो थोड़ा चल के तो देखो पता चलेगा क्या कैपेबिलिटी है.
No, it also comes in all aspects, whether it's
Yeah.
our employees. Sometimes I would hire people very quickly, and people would say, you have not gone through the CV, you've not gone through the things. And I just say, it seems like a good person. And that whole thing of seems like a good person, I think is very critical because people can learn things. But when I say this to Alok, he says that is because you have very high confidence in lack of failure. And so you have the same for others, that you believe others also cannot fail. And
Yeah.
sometimes is that confidence works because if you take the
It rubs
cumulative
off on them.
CVs of our top 100 people, they may not be that impressive. But if you look at the work they've achieved, it's very impressive. And a lot of that comes from the confidence they have in each other, both them in me and us, and me in them. It's just the confidence that, हाँ हम लोग हैं तो हम तो जीतेंगे ही, right? It's
Yeah.
like, yeah, if you're doing it, obviously you'll win. And I think that itself changes everything, because you're not saying, oh, today he made this mistake, you're not looking out for things, you're not looking out for errors you're making.
I think courage is contagious, and I can share it from my own running and Ironman journey experience perspective. The more you talk to people who are preparing along with you, and you run through those nuances or instances where you might have a challenge, and when you discuss with the others, and that courage of other people simply rubs off on you, and you tend to completely change your approach the moment you know that there are other people who are doing that. And if they are not scared, there is no reason for us to be scared. Fantastic discussion, Yashish. I really appreciate the deep down details you went through with your own learning journey. Any parting messages, any words of wisdom from you, anything which
Yeah, wisdom.
you.
Yeah, everybody has to live their own journey. I always say this to people: don't ever lie to yourself, because it's eventually your life and your objectives, and don't go in for pretense, etc. You should know what you're doing and why you're doing it. And once you know that, why will you not succeed? I used to say this to my children, that decide is a very big word. And they say, what do you mean? I said, if you decide, and I say this again, Hetal, I'm saying this on this conversation as well. You don't need talent, you don't need anything. If any one person who's a 5 year old decides to do anything in the world, they will definitely
Possible.
succeed. No,
Yeah,
no, it's not possible. They will 100% succeed. I'm not saying 99.9%. 100% they will succeed
correct.
at their objective. The point is, decide is a very difficult word. Decide is not decide करके अगले दिन भूल गए.
Yeah,
Decide then takes a journey. Then it takes a commitment. What I used to tell my children when they were young, and they both said, look, we're not going to decide anything, because we are so afraid of this word decide. Because once you decide, you don't give yourself an option to
yeah,
not do that. So let's just say some child who's 5 years old decides they want to be the Olympic gold medalist. Then they don't have an option to think they will not become one. And they will have to do everything that is required to do that. And I can guarantee, if somebody actually does that, which is very, very hard to do, I also guarantee not even 1% of the world, even if they want to, can do it. Not even 0.1%. But if they actually decide to do it and live that
yeah.
life for the next 15 years, they will definitely, gold नहीं आएगा तो bronze तो पक्का आ जाएगा.
Ah. And the fact of the matter is that it is so difficult that so few people do it. And that's why those people who do it actually get there. It's a saying
Exactly.
there. If you really decide to do something, the whole universe contrives to enable you to do that. And I think that's where a factor of luck also comes in. You suddenly feel, hey, yaar, everything started working for him the moment he decided that that's what he wants to do. And as you rightly mentioned, that deciding moment or factor of deciding is a lot of people don't bring that out as something as powerful as that.
Yeah. And I think after that, you can't tell yourself every day that maybe it will not happen. Anyway,
Great.
awesome speaking with you, Ethel.
Thanks a lot, Yashish.
Thank you.
Pleasure talking. Thank you. Bye bye.
All right. Bye.
Bye.